Hello, everyone, and I hope you're having a wonderful day. Today, we're diving into a powerful and emotional story about survival, love, and the strength it takes to hold on when everything seems lost. It all begins with a tragic accident that sends Tu Tieu, who is pregnant, into the hospital, fighting for both her life and her unborn child. As the story unfolds inside the hospital walls, the people who love her are forced to face impossible choices. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss any of our future episodes. The sirens tore through the city as the ambulance sped through traffic, lights flashing against the twilight sky. Inside, a young woman lay unconscious, her face pale, blood trickling down from a wound above her brow. Her name was Tu Tieu, a hit and run. Witnesses said the car never slowed down. She had just stepped off the curb, maybe heading to grab a quick snack, maybe just heading home. No one knew. She had no wallet, no ID, only a crumpled scrap of paper in her coat pocket. On it, a single name, Yuri, emergency contact. Yuri's phone buzzed on the table. An unknown number. He almost didn't pick up, but something in his chest tightened. Hello? This is Central Hospital. Are you Yuri? A woman named Tu Tieu has listed you as her emergency contact. She's been in a serious accident. You need to come now. He didn't speak, didn't breathe. He grabbed his keys, slammed the door behind him, and ran. The hospital was a blur of fluorescent lights and hushed urgency. Yuri pushed through the sliding doors, eyes searching wildly until a nurse waved him down. She's in trauma room 3. They're working on her now. He followed the nurse through the corridor, his heartbeat pounding like a war drum. And then he saw her, Tu Tieu, lying on the gurney, motionless. Tubes running from her arms, a neck brace holding her still. Blood stained her shirt. Machines beeped steadily but quietly. He stepped forward, then stopped. This wasn't how he was supposed to see her tonight. He had a ring in his pocket. Tonight was supposed to be the night. But now, all he could do was watch. Hours passed in silence. Yuri sat in the waiting area, elbows on his knees, hands clasped tightly. He hadn't blinked, hadn't moved. The last time he saw her, this morning, she was teasing him about his unshaven chin, laughing like she always did, eyes sparkling, like the world had never touched her. He had kissed her goodbye without knowing it might have been the last time. Earlier that morning, he had called his mother, not because he had to, but because he wanted her blessing. Mom, he'd said, I'm going to ask Tu Tieu to marry me. A long silence followed. Are you sure about this? She finally said. She doesn't have a family. She didn't finish school. She comes from nowhere. Yuri had expected that, but it still stung. I know who she is, he said, and I love her. That's enough. Another silence. Just be careful, she said. Love doesn't erase reality. The trauma surgeon came out just after 10 p.m. Yuri stood instantly. She's stable, the doctor said, but she's unconscious. Severe concussion, fractured ribs, some internal bruising. We're monitoring for complications. Can I see her? Just for a minute. She looked small in the hospital bed, so unlike herself. Yuri pulled the chair close and sat, hands shaking slightly as he reached for hers. He didn't say anything. Not at first. He just watched her chest rise and fall. Grateful. Then quietly, You're safe now, he whispered. I'm here. I'm not leaving. The next morning, Yuri's mother showed up. She had barely slept. She didn't ask why she was called. She already knew. She stood outside the room, watching through the glass as her son held the hand of a girl she barely knew. She almost died, Yuri said, not looking at her. I know, his mother replied. I was supposed to propose last night. His mother said nothing. She doesn't have anyone else, Yuri said. No parents, no siblings. If I left, she'd be alone in that bed. You don't have to explain anything to me, his mother said after a long pause. But do you understand what you're choosing? He nodded. Then I'll support you, she said quietly. Later that afternoon, Tu Tieu stirred. Uri was still there, eyes heavy with exhaustion. Her fingers twitched. Her eyelids fluttered. Uri, she whispered, barely audible. He leaned in fast. I'm here, he said. You're okay. You're safe. She tried to sit up, but pain shot through her side. She gasped, wincing. Don't move too much, he said gently. You've been through a lot. She blinked slowly, confused. The baby? She asked, suddenly alert. Yuri hesitated. They're monitoring everything. So far, things look okay. But it's too early to say. A single tear slid from the corner of her eye. I thought I was going to die. But you didn't, Yuri said. You're still here. She looked at him, eyes full of something deeper than fear, a mix of love and guilt. I didn't mean to drag you into this, she whispered. You didn't, Yuri replied. I ran in. I chose this. I chose you. Days passed. The hospital room became their entire world. Doctors came and went. Tests were taken. Some results brought relief. Others didn't. At one point, her vitals dropped suddenly. The machines screamed. Nurses swarmed in. Uri was pushed out of the room. He stood in the hallway for 30 agonizing minutes, staring at the closed door, wondering if this was the end. It wasn't. But the fear never left him after that. Every morning, Uri was there, feeding her spoonfuls of soup, brushing her hair back, reading to her from a tattered book of short stories she loved. And every time she opened her eyes, she whispered the same thing. You're still here. And every time, he replied, I'm not going anywhere. Tu Tieu slowly began to recover, but the tension never truly eased. The baby's condition remained fragile, and a new diagnosis loomed, a hidden complication from the accident, a blood clot near her lung, risk of movement, risk of stress, risk of losing everything. The doctors considered inducing early labor. Too early, too dangerous. Uri sat with his head in his hands, weighing impossible choices. There were no guarantees, only fear and faith and love. 3 days had passed since the accident. Tu Tieu was stable, but the situation was far from safe. The doctors had confirmed what Yuri feared most. Her pregnancy had been severely impacted. There was pressure on her uterus from the impact. The baby was still alive, but small signs of distress had started to appear. Yuri sat beside her bed, staring at the monitor beeping in steady rhythm. He had memorized the sound. Each beat was a little victory. Each drop in pace was a threat. The doctor entered quietly. She needs to remain in bed rest, he said. No movement, no stress, no stairs, no standing too long. The risk of miscarriage is increasing. Uri nodded, absorbing the words. What are our options? The doctor hesitated. There's a chance, a small one, that if we induce labor early, the baby might survive with neonatal care. But it's risky, for both of them. Uri's stomach dropped. He looked at Tu Tieu, sleeping with a slight wince on her face. You want me to choose between her and the baby? The doctor sighed. I'm saying you may have to. Later that night, Tu Tieu woke again. She was more alert now, but the pain never left her eyes. Uri helped her sit up gently, She winced, holding her stomach. Something's wrong, she whispered. I feel it. Uri didn't lie. He told her everything. She listened silently, her hands folded protectively over her belly. So, if I try to carry to term, she began, the risk to your life increases, Uri finished. Tu Tieu looked down, then closed her eyes. I don't want you to choose, she said. I already did, Uri whispered. I chose you, a long time ago. The next morning, Uri's mother arrived. She had a stern look in her eyes, a look Uri knew well. She didn't speak at first, just stood at the foot of Tu Tieu's bed, arms crossed. Have the doctors told you the risks? She asked sharply. Tu Tieu nodded weakly. Yes. Uri's mother turned to her son. And you're just going to sit here and wait for something to go wrong. What do you want me to do, Mom? Uri snapped. Force her to terminate? Walk away? I want you to think clearly, she said. Not emotionally. She's already weak. This baby could kill her. Uri's fists clenched. Tu Tieu turned away, tears forming in her eyes. She didn't speak. She couldn't. Uri stood between them. She's not alone, and she's not weak. If she wants to fight for this baby, then I'll fight with her. His mother's voice cracked slightly. I just don't want to lose both of you. There was silence, and in that silence, something softened. Days passed. Every hour brought new tension. One night, Tu Tieu started bleeding. The nurses rushed in, followed by a doctor with panicked urgency. Uri was pushed out of the room again. He stood against the wall, fists clenched, chest heaving. His mother came up beside him. Uri. He looked at her with eyes full of helplessness. I can't do anything. You're doing more than you think, she said softly. After 20 agonizing minutes, the doctor came out. She's okay. For now. But the placenta is detaching. If it gets worse, we'll need to operate. That night, Uri held her hand while she slept. She had lost more blood. Her skin was cold, her body thinner than before. Uri leaned close and whispered, I had everything planned, you know. Roses. Your favorite dessert. A ring. I was going to ask you to marry me. And now, I just want you to wake up. I don't care if we never leave this hospital. Just wake up and say yes. The next day, the doctor called Uri in for a private talk. We've reached a breaking point, he said. If we wait longer, we could lose both. We need a decision by tonight. Emergency C-section, or continue to wait and risk everything. Uri stared at the wall behind the doctor. Numb. She's not strong enough for surgery, Uri whispered. She barely eats. She hasn't walked in over a week. Emotionally, she's stronger than anyone I've seen, the doctor said. But medically, she's hanging by a thread. Uri nodded slowly. I need to talk to her. He returned to her room. Tu Tieu was awake. Barely. Her voice was little more than a breath, but her eyes met his clearly. You heard the options, she said. Uri sat beside her, took her hand. Yeah. She was quiet, then said softly, I want the baby to live, Uri, even if I don't. Uri shut his eyes tight. Don't say that, he whispered. I'm not choosing one of you. I can't. Tu Tieu gave a tired smile. But you might have to. Night fell. The machines beeped slowly, steadily. Tu Tieu drifted in and out of sleep. Uri stayed by her side. His mother had gone home briefly to shower, promising she'd return by morning. Uri pulled out the small velvet box from his jacket. He opened it quietly, revealing the ring he'd held on to all this time. He placed it on her finger, even as she slept. You don't have to answer now, he whispered, his voice cracking. But this was always for you. At 3:27 a.m., the alarms blared. Tu Tieu's oxygen levels dropped. Doctors ran in. Uri was yanked away. The door slammed shut. This time, he feared it was truly over. After a devastating hit-and-run accident, Tu Tieu, who is pregnant, is rushed to the hospital in critical condition. Uri, her devoted partner, drops everything to stay by her side, refusing to leave even as her life hangs in the balance. As days pass in the ICU, doctors reveal that both Tu Tieu and the baby face serious complications. Uri's mother arrives, urging him to make a painful decision. Choose between saving Tu Tieu or risking both lives. Through sleepless nights, medical emergencies, and overwhelming emotions, Uri holds on to love, even proposing while she's unconscious. But time is running out. When Tu Tieu's condition suddenly worsens, Uri is forced to face the unthinkable. Will love be enough to carry them through? This is a heartbreaking journey of sacrifice, hope, and the fight for life inside the cold walls of a hospital